Billionaire Elon Musk's strategy to weed out and tighten the federal workforce is finally seeing pushback from the leaders of top government agencies. Over the weekend, an email sent out by the Office of Personnel Management demanding workers to list 5 accomplishments or risk losing their jobs received quick responses from agencies including the Pentagon, FBI, and State Department, who told employees to not respond. And today, federal workers are now suing over the email, saying Musk violated the law with his weekend demand. Joining me now is the Hill's courts and legal reporter Zach Schonfeld with more. Zach, a federal lawsuit filed in California was updated to include the email that was sent out over the weekend. The original suit looked to block mass layoffs by Musk and President Trump. What do we know about this amended lawsuit and how the email ties into their effort to protect employees?
Hey, Judy, this lawsuit originally was just a few days old. It was filed just last week in federal court in San Francisco. And as you mentioned, it originally had just focused on the Trump administration's efforts to fire probationary employees across the federal government. These are employees who tend to be in either their first or perhaps second year of service in their specific position. But on Sunday, this lawsuit, which was filed by a coalition of government employee unions, they updated it to now directly challenge this new email that was sent out to federal workers over the weekend with tonight's deadline to either reply with 5 accomplishments that they accomplished in their job last week or otherwise face termination. This is now the first legal challenge to this effort that we've seen in court, perhaps not the last. But as you mentioned, even outside courtrooms, we're seeing certain federal agencies already telling their employees to not respond. So there's frankly been a lot of confusion as this 11:59 p.m. Monday deadline approaches.
Late on Friday, a judge ruled that the Trump administration could proceed with plans to put USAID employees on administrative leave. On Sunday, 2,000 workers at the agency were fired via email. How does that ruling tie into these other lawsuits surrounding the Trump administration's right to fire federal employees?
There is some overlap with those other lawsuits, but in addition, there are unique arguments that are specific to this USAID context. And that's largely a reflection of the fact that so many USAID workers, they're not working here domestically, but they're working overseas across the globe. And so when this lawsuit was originally filed, the judge had actually issued a temporary order in favor of the plaintiffs, stopping a lot of the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle USAID. And the judge at the time, this is a Trump-appointed judge, he indicated that he was concerned that these USAID workers, if the plans moved forward, might be forced to very suddenly have to not only lose their job, but also get up and come back to the States from wherever they are across the globe. But now that this case has progressed a little bit further, there's been more briefing. This same judge has gotten sworn declarations from administration officials about what's been happening on the ground. The judge is now going the other way, saying he no longer believes that the plaintiffs are entitled to an injunction. In this ruling, he said that their concerns were, quote, overstated.
Zach Schonfeld, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Judy.
FBI Director Kash Patel and Director of National Security Agency Tulsi Gabbard were quick to rebuke Musk's email telling employees to not respond. The standoff between Trump's right-hand man and agency leaders is beginning to take shape as the administration looks to continue its sweeping cuts. Joining me now is the Hill's national political reporter, Julia Manchester. Julia, are we beginning to see this power struggle that's already inside the Trump administration over control of federal agencies and which agencies are being forced to respond?
Yeah, Judy, I don't know if it's necessarily a power struggle. It could be, but I think it's also a sign of, maybe the speed and chaotic nature of how all of this is really unfolding. Look, Elon Musk is someone who has President Trump's ear. He is very much President Trump's right-hand man, especially when it comes to DOGE, but this is indicative that maybe there weren't clear channels of communication between DOGE and a number of these federal agencies, including the FBI and DNI. Now, in that original email that Musk sent out, or that was sent out from Musk, it did note that the employees should not include classified information, but clearly a lot of confusion in the wake of that email being sent out on a Saturday.
On a Saturday, that's right. A new Reuters Ipsos poll shows Americans are focused on their wallets, not so much on other policies that Trump has imposed. Just 32% approve of the president's performance on prices. 53% oppose what they see from the Department of Government Efficiency. Democratic strategist James Carville even suggested the Trump administration will collapse within 30 days as the public reacts to the administration's actions. What's his take, and is the door opening for Democrats to strike on these issues?
I think you're already seeing Democrats strike on these issues, and you're seeing it happening from Democratic governors, Democratic state lawmakers, and also obviously in Congress. DOGE and Elon Musk have very much become, I think, a target point for Democrats who are still very much trying to grapple to get a message to respond to Trump. So they're using this to hit Trump and using Elon Musk's face. We know that Elon Musk himself is not popular, according to a number of public opinion polls. They're using it, to hit the Trump administration and trying to put Republicans on the defense. And I think it's been interesting to see how Republicans on the other side of this have approached DOGE. You have earlier today, for example, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announcing DOGE efforts in Florida, very much trying to mimic what the Trump administration is trying to do to have Florida, play a helping hand in terms of implementing DOGE efforts. But then further up north in Virginia, you have Governor Glenn Youngkin walking a very fine line, realizing that there are close to 145,000 federal workers in the state of Virginia, particularly in Northern Virginia outside of Washington, D.C. He's saying he has empathy for these workers, but also touting that there are over 250,000 private sector jobs in Virginia now open. He's touting this new economic task force called Virginia Has Jobs. So it's been interesting to see Democrats try to put Republicans on the defense on this, while some Republicans lean into it and others walking that fine line.
With DOGE's sweeping cuts to the federal workforce, the moves could prove to be a political liability, as you mentioned, for some Republicans. You just wrote an article on how Democrats have their eyes set on the governor's mansion in Virginia. What's their strategy there?
Well, look, you heard me just say that Governor Youngkin, who's term limited, he can't run again this November, but his Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears, they've been talking about the private sector job opportunities in Virginia, saying that, if there are people who are laid off, assuming there are federal workers laid off, if they haven't been already, they will have an opportunity to seek private sector jobs. But Virginia Democrats say not so fast. They argue that, that's sort of arrogant and short-sighted to essentially say if you lose your federal government job, you can automatically get a private sector job. So you're seeing Virginia Democrats very much try to sound the alarm. We know that in their special session in Richmond in the state legislature, Democratic House Speaker Don Scott created an emergency committee aimed at addressing cuts to the federal workforce in Virginia. So this is becoming a big issue, and it's not just the federal workforce itself, Judy, in Virginia. We know that this is a state, particularly in the northern part of the state, that relies quite a bit on the federal workforce. So the economy could potentially be impacted if the Trump administration moves parts of the federal government out of the greater Washington, D.C. area. On top of that, in the Hampton Roads, Norfolk area, an area that's seen as a bit of a swingy area for Virginia Republicans and Democrats, there's a very, very large military population, and the military in many ways could be impacted by cuts to the Department of Defense, cuts to the Veterans Affairs Administration, and so on. So this is proving to be, a key issue, just, way far out, I should say, from the election. We know that it's March or almost March now. The election is obviously in November, so a lot could change between now and then.
Julia Manchester, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Texas Department of Safety says smuggling networks are adapting faster and making millions of dollars despite the decline in border crossings. In an exclusive ride-along, troopers take News Nation to active smuggling spots where officers say migrants are paying up to $18,000 to cross the Rio Grande. News Nation's Jorge Ventura joins us now from McAllen, Texas, with the details.
Here on the southern border, migrant encounters continue to trend down, and President Trump pressuring Mexico to crack down on illegal immigration. The southern border isn't seeing the thousands of migrants arrive every day like it did last year. Now, this doesn't mean that the crisis is over just yet. There are still thousands of migrants in Mexico stuck in limbo since President Trump ended the CBP-1 program. Now, smugglers in Mexico are capitalizing on the desperation of migrants and charging up to $18,000 to be smuggled across the Rio Grande. News Nation got the opportunity to ride along with Texas state troopers in the Rio Grande Valley, an area seeing an uptick in smuggling, with migrants now trying to enter the U.S. undetected and smugglers in Mexico looking to make big bucks. Within our first hour with Texas trooper Guadalupe Casares, he received an alert right away from a camera showing individuals entering the U.S. illegally and attempting to hide in the brush. Border Patrol agents and Texas National Guard troops also arrived on the scene to assist the Texas state troopers. I followed Casares as he and other Border Patrol agents cleared the brush and tracked the individuals' footsteps as the pursuit was on, eventually leading them to two Mexican nationals lying on the ground attempting to hide from authorities. They believe the male in the purple sweatshirt was the guide. The men told authorities that the original plan was to head to Mexico. Now they both face charges for smuggling.
So we followed that trail within the ditch for a couple yards, and we ended up catching up to these two individuals that were in the ditch trying to avoid our apprehension and avoid detection.
While the two men were apprehended, we saw Border Patrol agents checking the men, looking close for tattoos or other signs that could link them to a gang or a criminal group in Mexico. We got to witness firsthand how smugglers are now changing their tactics on the southern border. Under the Biden administration, smugglers would actually purposely look for Border Patrol agents and send migrant groups their way, overwhelming resources on the American side. Now, smugglers in Mexico are moving smaller groups and looking for areas not patrolled by Texas troopers and National Guard or Border Patrol agents. All three agencies working together to deter smugglers.
So it's really a team effort. Majority of the time, our BP agents are processing individuals, and that's where we come in and we try to cover that gap so that these people don't get across.
Texas DPS drones also critical when it comes to spotting smugglers. They also captured this raft in action, attempting to smuggle 3 Mexican nationals. As soon as those individuals reached American soil, they were quickly apprehended while the smuggler paddled back to Mexico. We could also see scouts on the Mexican side looking and monitoring U.S. authorities on the American side. Also, Texas DPS troopers and Border Patrol agents in the RGV are working closely together to stop drugs from entering the U.S. Here, the two agencies intercepted 187 pounds of narcotics, arresting 3 Mexican nationals in Cameron County. The 3 men now face prosecution. While smuggling activity has picked up in the RGV, Border Patrol and Texas DPS are not the only ones on the field working to secure the border. Texas National Guard troops are providing now another layer of support for Border Patrol agents on the ground. For the first time ever, these troops are officially deputized and have the legal authority to detain and arrest migrants entering the U.S. illegally. Here, we can see images of troops arresting and processing migrants who attempted to enter near Roma, Texas, a location that has become a hotspot for migrant and drug smuggling in recent weeks. The goal for authorities here on the border is to stay one step ahead of smugglers on the Mexican side, who are now looking to capitalize on the desperation of migrants now looking to enter the United States undetected. Back to you.
News Nation's Jorge Ventura, thank you. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Judy Kurtz. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.